Hi everyone, welcome to the Story Times. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. Hi, I'm James, so let's begin. My ex-wife left me and our babies to find real love, then demanded I fund her new family, so I taught them a lesson they won't forget. 8 years ago, my ex, Sophia, and I broke up right after our twins were born. We hadn't been together long, just about 14 months, when she found out she was pregnant. We both panicked and thought, well, maybe we should try to make this work for the kids. You know how it goes. You think a relationship will just fall into place because of the family aspect. I'll admit we weren't exactly compatible from the start. We had some good times, sure, but it wasn't a deep, long-lasting connection. When she got pregnant, I thought maybe we could push through and make it work. We were about as compatible as chalk and cheese, though. Still, for the twins, we gave it our best shot for a while. Things were okay for a time. We had arguments, as people do, but nothing major. We co-parented well enough and weren't at each other's throats. Then she met someone new, someone she thought she could have a future with. I got it. She wanted a fresh start, something different from what we had. She was upfront about it, and we agreed that splitting up was for the best. I can't say I was heartbroken because, honestly, the relationship wasn't solid. We ended things amicably, as far as breakups go. We settled into a rhythm with co-parenting after that. Things were smooth, or as smooth as they can be with two people raising kids from separate homes. We split time evenly, kept communication focused on the kids, and co-parented decently. We both wanted to ensure the twins weren't affected by any tension, so we made a real effort. The kids got time with both of us, and we didn't have child support since we split everything evenly. 2 years after we split, Sophia met her now husband. This guy wasn't the one she started dating right after our breakup. He was someone new. Here's the thing. He had a daughter the same age as our twins. She told me about him and how they were getting serious. I wanted to support that to make things easier for the kids. I was fine with them having another father figure around. But things started shifting when she brought up including her stepdaughter in the same way we included our twins in everything. She threw it out casually, like, it'd be nice if we all did things as one big family. At first it seemed harmless enough. I thought she was just trying to blend families. But it got strange when she started suggesting I treat her stepdaughter like my own. Let me be clear, I have nothing against her stepdaughter. She's just a kid in the middle of all this. But Sophia seemed to think that because we were connected through the twins, I was obligated to make her stepdaughter part of every activity and outing I had with my kids. When we first talked about it, I told her that while I understood she wanted everyone included, it wasn't my responsibility to act as a dad to her new husband's kid. I already had my hands full being a good dad to my twins. She kept pushing the idea, though. I try not to get frustrated. Co-parenting is tricky. You're balancing your family's needs while keeping the peace with an ex and their new partner. But the expectations kept piling up. Things took a turn when she started expecting me to babysit her stepdaughter whenever I had my twins. For example, if I was taking my kids out for a weekend activity, she'd call and ask if I'd take her stepdaughter along. I didn't mind occasionally, but it became an expectation. Don't get me wrong, I don't mind helping out here and there. But I didn't sign up to be a third parent to her husband's kid, and I didn't see how that was fair to me or my own kids. After some time, I realized that every time I planned something special for my twins, it turned into a thing about the other kids in her household. It was like I wasn't allowed to have time just with my own kids anymore. When I bought gifts or planned a surprise outing, I'd hear about how it wasn't fair if her stepdaughter wasn't included in the same way. She even got upset once because I didn't spend as much on a gift for her stepdaughter as I did for our twins. I had to draw the line somewhere, so I decided to keep my time and resources focused on my twins. I explained this to her, and, predictably, it didn't go over well. She said I was being selfish and not supporting her whole family. She wanted this big, blended family, but that wasn't something I had signed up for. I told her that while I wanted my twins to feel like they belonged, it didn't mean I had to support kids who weren't mine in the same way. She wasn't happy, but we kept things civil enough to continue co-parenting. Since that conversation, we've been more parallel parenting than co-parenting, if that makes sense. We stick to our own time with the kids and rarely do anything together as a big family. We don't share plans or mix the kids from her house with mine. It keeps things simple and lets me focus on my own kids without extra expectations. Still, every now and then, she'll bring it up, like I'm supposed to feel guilty for not helping raise all the kids under her roof. Over the years, the situation with her family has gotten more complicated. She and her husband had a baby together, and later, they took in her husband's nephew. Now, at her place, there are my twins, their stepsister, a step-cousin, and a half-sister. Sophia tries to keep everyone as one big, happy family, but I've made it clear that my role is with my kids, and that's it. It's complicated. Every time I think we've hit a point where things are settled, something new comes up. But I've stuck to my boundaries, and I don't think it's unreasonable to focus on the two kids who are actually mine. It's one thing to support her decisions as a mother, but it's another to be expected to parent everyone under her roof. Fast forward a bit, and here's where things really went off the rails. Over the years, with the added members of Sophia's household, it's been harder to keep boundaries steady. At first, we'd figured out a balance where I was doing my part as a dad without being wrapped up in her new family situation. But her expectations kept growing, and it felt like every few months, there was something new she expected me to help with. Her stepdaughter, her husband's nephew, their baby together. It was like they kept adding layers, and somehow I was supposed to shoulder some of that load. Then came this whole school trip thing. The school my kids go to is small, so they're in a mixed-age class, which means they're in the same classroom as their stepsister and stepcousin. Fair enough, it's unusual but works for the school, and it doesn't bother me. What I didn't expect was how it would turn into a thing with their mom and stepdad about what I was supposed to pay for. This trip is a big deal for the kids. It's not just a small field trip, it's a visit to an interactive museum that's supposed to be amazing. The school plans hands-on learning and workshops. It's pricey, no doubt, but my twins were super excited, and it seemed like a good memory for them. I can cover the cost, so I figured why not? I paid for them. I told Sophia about it, thinking she'd be glad the twins were getting this experience. Wrong. The minute I mentioned paying for it, she got weirdly quiet, then flat out said that if the other kids couldn't go, it wasn't fair. At first, I thought she was joking, like there's no way she expected me to pay for the other two as well, but she was dead serious. She said it's not right for our kids to go on this luxury trip if her other kids can't go too. I tried to keep calm and told her I'm paying for my twins because they're my responsibility. I suggested maybe she and her husband could try fundraising or saving up for the other kids if it meant that much. But then she hit me with, you need to think about how they're all going to feel watching your kids go on this trip and being left behind. Apparently, the whole household will fall apart if these kids don't all get the same experiences. Here's where it got heated. Her husband jumped in, saying it's unfair to treat the kids differently. I'm all for fairness, but there's a line here. His stepsister and nephew aren't my responsibility, and I'm not made of money. I asked him straight up, Shoo, why is it my job to pay for all the kids in your house? He gave me this look like I was the selfish one. He even went on a rant about how they're all supposed to be siblings and how I'm sabotaging their family. Look, I get it. No kid wants to be left out, but at some point they have to understand I'm not their dad. Sophia has decided to bring in these other kids and create this new family setup. That's her choice, and I'm not about to be guilt-tripped into paying for every kid she takes under her roof. What really set me off was when they made it sound like I was being cruel. They talked about how this would damage the kids' relationships and that it would be my fault if our twins and their stepsister grew apart over something like this. Come on, I'm just a dad trying to do something nice for my own kids, and somehow it's turned into family drama about what I'm not doing for kids who aren't mine. I said, Pa, look, I don't think it's fair to expect me to cover everyone's expenses. This trip is a treat for our twins. It's during my time with them, and I want them to go. I don't see how that's unfair to anyone. But Sophia kept going, saying that if our twins go and the other kids don't, they'll feel treated as less than, and I should care about that. Her husband even brought up in family unity and said that if the kids resent each other, it'll be on me. At that point, I was over it. This wasn't about family unity. It was about them making their financial choices my problem. It's not like they're struggling to get by, either. They have decent jobs, and if this trip meant that much, they could find a way to make it work without relying on me. It's not my job to stretch my finances to make up for what they can't or won't do. The argument went in circles. They kept bringing up fairness and how I should think about the family, but I stood my ground. I told them it wasn't my fault they couldn't send the other kids, and that I wasn't going to let them guilt-trip me into paying for it. That's where we left it, but I could tell from the look on her face that this was far from over. Honestly, I walked away from that conversation feeling irritated and confused. No matter how much I explained that I wasn't responsible for all her family's kids, they weren't hearing it. Somehow, my focus on my own kids had become an issue, and I was being made out to be the villain in their family story. It's exhausting. I just wanted to do something nice for my twins, and now it's become this giant issue about fairness and unity. I feel like I'm walking a tightrope where every decision could spark another argument. All I wanted was to give my kids a fun experience, but apparently, that's too much to ask. After the argument over the school trip, I figured that would be the end of it, at least for now. I thought I'd made it clear I wasn't paying for all the kids, and I hoped Sophia and her husband would drop it, but nope. They weren't about to let it go without another round. I didn't expect what came next, though, because this one blew me out of the water. A few days after the trip argument, I got a message from Sophia saying she wanted to meet up to talk. I knew this wasn't going to be a friendly coffee date, but I figured it's better to get it over with than to keep going back and forth through text. I agreed, and we set a time to meet at a small diner halfway between our places. She showed up, and right off the bat, I could tell this wasn't going to be a quick chat. She had that serious look on her face, the one where you know they've rehearsed what they're going to say. She sat down and started with, "Since I don't think you're understanding the situation." I thought I seen he understood it just fine. I'm paying for my kids, and that's that. But I let her talk. She went into this whole thing about how I need to look at the bigger picture, and how this isn't just about a school trip. It's about setting a standard for how we'll handle things going forward. I guess she thought framing it as a big family philosophy would make me feel obligated to agree. She said this trip is just one example, and in the future, there will be other activities, events, maybe even family vacations, and we should be on the same page about treating all the kids equally. I couldn't believe it. Was she seriously suggesting I pay for family vacations for all her kids now? I listened, trying not to react too much because I knew if I got heated, it would make things worse. Then she brought up the fairness argument again. She said your kids get to do these things and the others don't. It's going to cause resentment. They're going to feel left out. She even went as far as to say it could damage the kids' relationships with each other, that they'll grow up with this inequality that'll tear them apart. I sat there thinking, and aren't there already different kids from different families with different lives? Why is this my problem to solve? When she finished, I tried to keep my voice calm and said, "I get that you want all the kids to feel equal, but these aren't my kids. They're not my responsibility." I reminded her that we've been doing this parallel parenting thing for a while, where she handles things on her end and I handle things on mine. But apparently she's decided that's not enough anymore. That's when she dropped the real kicker. She said, "If you really cared about the kids' well-being, you want to support the whole family, not just your kids." She went on about how I needed to show good faith by stepping up for the other kids as well. I almost laughed out loud because it felt absurd. Since when does supporting your kids mean taking on everyone else's kids too? At that point, I felt myself starting to lose it. I told her, "Look, I do care about my kids' well-being. That's why I'm willing to do these things for them. But I'm not going to let you guilt trip me into paying for kids that aren't mine." She didn't like that. She got defensive, saying I'm being selfish and not thinking about how this will affect the kids in the long run. I fired back. "How is it selfish to take care of my own kids? You made the choice to add these other kids into your household. That's not on me." Then her husband showed up. I don't know if she planned for him to just happen to stop by, but suddenly he was there, coming over to our table. He barely acknowledged me and went straight to Sophia like he was about to save the day. He sat down and started in on me like he'd been waiting for this chance. He said, "Sud, don't think you're being fair. We're supposed to be creating a family here, and your actions are putting up barriers." I stared at him, wondering if he really thought I'd buy into this we're all family thing when it came to my wallet. I told him straight up, "Sunshine, I'm here to support my twins. That's what I signed up for. You can't expect me to pretend all these other kids are mine financially." Then he hit me with, "Well, if the kids start hating each other, that's on you. You're the one creating division." That set me off. I told him, "You're the one pushing for me to play dad to kids that aren't mine. I'm not the one making this complicated. I just want to do right by my twins, and that's it." I didn't care if he thought I was being cold. I felt like they were ganging up on me, making me feel like the bad guy for having boundaries. Things got heated after that. Sophia started saying that if the kids grow up resenting each other, it'll be because I didn't care enough to support their family vision. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her, "Tiff, that's the case. Maybe you and your husband need to figure out a way to handle it. but don't put it all on me. By this point, people in the diner were giving us looks, and I didn't care. I was fed up with being made to feel like the villain. I just wanted to do something nice for my kids, and it had spiraled into this mess about what I owed her household. It was like they expected me to fund whatever came up for every kid under their roof because they decided to blend their families. I stood up and said, "Look, I've said my piece. My focus is on my twins, and that's not changing. If you want everything to be equal, maybe you need to look at what you guys are doing, not what I'm doing. I'm done being the bad guy here." With that, I walked out, feeling a mix of frustration and relief. It was clear no matter what I said, they weren't going to get it. As I left, I could feel their eyes on me, like they were waiting for me to give in, but I was done. After that disaster of a conversation, I thought things might cool down. I figured Sophia and her husband would get the point and drop it, but I should have known better. The whole thing didn't disappear, it got worse. A few days later, I started getting long-winded texts from her family members. It started with her sister, who's usually chill and stays out of our issues. Suddenly, she's texting me about how it's important for the kids to feel like they're in one big family. She said things like, "If you really cared about your kids' happiness, you'd be willing to do this for them." It felt like she was implying I was doing something wrong because I didn't want to pay for her sister's stepkids. I tried ignoring it, thinking she'd let it go, but the messages kept coming, and they got less nice. It went from subtle suggestions to flat-out accusations. Suddenly, I'm selfish, stingy, not thinking about the bigger picture. They made it sound like I was tearing their happy family apart just because I didn't want to fund a trip for kids who aren't mine. Her family acted like I'd declared war on them. Then it got worse. Sophia's mom called me. I hadn't spoken to her in a while and was surprised to see her name pop up. I figured she'd want to talk about the twins, maybe have a calm discussion. Nope. She launched into a speech about how things should be. She said, "If you just paid for all the kids, this wouldn't be an issue. You need to think about how much better it would be if you were more involved with all the children." I felt my patience slipping. I said, "With all due respect, those kids are not my responsibility. I'm doing right by my own kids, and that's what I signed up for." But she kept going, saying, "A good man steps up and takes care of the whole family, not just his own." I was floored. I tried to explain that while I want the best for my twins, it doesn't mean I have to financially support every kid or daughter brought into the household. I said, "I'm not going to feel bad for taking care of my own kids and setting boundaries." She wasn't listening. The conversation spiraled, with her repeating herself about my duty as a father and how the kids will suffer. She played the guilt card hard. By the end, I was done. I told her we weren't going to agree, politely ended the call, and that was that. The pressure didn't stop. Over the next week, it felt like they were rallying the whole family against me. Sophia's brother left a passive-aggressive comment on one of my social media posts about being a dad, saying, "Improud dads support their families no matter what." It was obvious he wasn't talking about just my kids. I didn't respond. I deleted the comment and moved on, but it annoyed me. I'm doing my best for my twins, and somehow that makes me the bad guy in their eyes. One day, I dropped the kids off at Sophia's, and as I was heading back to my car, her husband caught up to me. No hi shy, no small talk. He jumped in with, "You know you're hurting the kids with this." I was taken aback. I thought we'd hash this out, but he wasn't done. He talked about how my decision not to pay for all the kids is driving a wedge between the siblings and how I need to be more considerate of the family dynamic. I told him, "And I'm not hurting anyone. I'm taking care of my kids. They're not the ones struggling here." He wouldn't drop it, going on about how everyone in the family thinks I'm unfair and how it's only a matter of time before the kids pick up on it and resent each other. It felt like he was laying the whole weight of the family's happiness on my shoulders. I told him, "Your family's opinion doesn't change my responsibilities. I'm not their dad. I'm here for my kids, and that's not going to change." At that point, I didn't know what else to say. No matter what I did, they were going to see me as the villain. That night, I sat there trying to figure out how it had come to this. All I wanted was to take care of my kids and give them good experiences, and I was being painted as some cold-hearted guy who didn't care about family unity. They couldn't see the line between what's fair and what's not. I vented to a couple of close friends about it. They couldn't believe the pressure Sophia's family was putting on me. One friend joked that if they were so worried about the kids missing out, they could pitch in and fund the trip themselves. It made me laugh, but it was frustrating because it felt like her whole family had decided I was obligated to be an all-in parent to kids who weren't mine, just to keep the peace with people who didn't respect my boundaries. The whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth. I was getting texts and calls from random family members, all pushing the same line, and I was over it. It felt like they'd built up this idea that I owed them something, and they weren't going to drop it until I caved. By the end of that week, I realized reasoning with them was pointless. They weren't looking for an explanation. They wanted me to fall in line. I told myself I wasn't going to let them wear me down. My kids are my responsibility, and I wasn't going to let this extended family guilt trip change that. It's crazy that all this started from me trying to pay for my kids' school trip, but it turned into a battle over who's doing enough for the whole family. They may not like it, but I know where I stand. After that week of nonstop messages, friendly advice, and guilt tripping from Sophia's family, I decided to make a final call on my boundaries and stick to them, no exceptions. It was clear that no matter how much I explained myself, they weren't going to get it. They were laser-focused on this one big, happy family idea, and I was the guy standing in the way by refusing to pay for every kid they added to their home. First, I talked to my twins about the upcoming trip. I wanted to ensure they were still excited and didn't feel awkward about it because, after all the drama, I didn't want them to feel guilty. I kept it simple and said, "Hey, I'm really looking forward to this trip for you guys, and I want you to know this is something special for just the two of you." I didn't go into the messy details, but I wanted them to know it was okay to enjoy something for themselves. Both seemed relieved. They'd picked up on some tension, kids always do, but they were happy and genuinely excited to go. That was a huge weight off my shoulders. I needed them to know they deserved nice experiences without feeling responsible for anyone else. With that settled, I knew I had to set clear boundaries with Sophia and her family. Not just a vague and paying for my kids only boundary, but a real line they'd understand couldn't be crossed. I called her, keeping it calm and straightforward because I didn't want another hour-long argument. I said, "Nook, my role as a parent is to support my twins. I'm here for them, and I'm doing what I can to give them good experiences, but that doesn't extend to other children who aren't mine. I respect your choices and your family, but my financial responsibility ends with my twins." Of course, she wasn't thrilled. She started in on how the other kids would feel and how it's not fair for siblings to have different experiences. I let her talk, but when she went down the guilt-tripping path again, I stopped her. I said, "Understand how you feel, but this is my final decision. I'm not paying for any extra expenses outside of our twins. If you want to work something out for your household, that's up to you, but you need to stop putting that pressure on me." There was silence for a few moments, and I could tell she was fuming, but I wasn't budging. I could almost feel her gearing up for one last pitch, but she must have realized it wasn't going anywhere. She said something like, "Fine, I guess you've made your choice," in a tone meant to make me feel bad, but I didn't. By that point, I felt more relief than anything else. I was done explaining myself. After that, things got quieter. No more random messages from her family, no more passive-aggressive comments, just silence. It was a bit awkward, but it felt good to have peace. I think they realized I wasn't going to bend to their demands, and they had to deal with it. In the weeks leading up to the trip, I spent extra time with the twins doing regular things to keep everything feeling normal. We'd grab a bite, go to the park, watch movies, all the usual stuff. I wanted them to feel secure and happy, not caught up in the adults' issues. It was refreshing to focus on them without the extra drama. Then the day of the trip came. I dropped them off at school that morning, and they were all smiles, ready to go. Seeing them so excited after everything was great. As they ran off to join their friends, I felt a real sense of satisfaction, like, yeah, this is what it's about. It's not about making everyone happy or bending over backward for people who don't appreciate it. It's about giving my kids the best I can and teaching them it's okay to set boundaries. Here's the kicker. The day after the trip, I got a call from Sophia. I was expecting a snarky comment or a passive-aggressive dig, but instead, she asked if the kids had fun. I told her they did and kept it short because I didn't want to dive back into old arguments. Then she surprised me. She said, "Sint, and I didn't agree with you, but I respect that you stood up for yourself and your kids." I guess I needed to hear that. I was shocked. I didn't expect her to come around, but there it was. It wasn't an apology, but it felt like an acknowledgement that maybe I wasn't the villain they'd made me out to be. Since then, things have been more peaceful. I don't hear from her family, and it's like we've reached a new level of understanding. We might not agree on everything, but we've accepted our roles in the kids' lives. Honestly, I think it's made me a better dad because I'm not constantly second-guessing every decision, wondering how it'll affect her household. I'm just focusing on what's best for my twins. In the end, this situation taught me something important. Sometimes, setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to others. It's about saying yes to your own peace of mind. I've learned it's okay to prioritize my family and not feel guilty about it. If others don't get it, that's on them, not me. Things are in a good place now. The twins are happy, I'm happy, and it feels like we're moving forward without the extra baggage. I've made it clear where I stand, and I think everyone, even Sophia and her husband, has come to respect that. It's not perfect, and I'm sure there'll be bumps down the road, but I know I can stand my ground and make decisions that are best for my family, without getting lost in everyone else's expectations. A few weeks after things settled down, I thought I'd heard the last of the demands. But then Sophia hit me with something new. She started talking about the twins' living situation at her place and how they don't have the same comforts they have with me. At first, I thought she was venting until she hinted that I should do something about it. It turns out she wanted me to buy a house, not for me, but for them. She said it's not fair for the kids to go back and forth between two different standards of living and that it could hurt their self-esteem if they feel like they're lacking at her place. I was trying to process if she was serious, but she was dead serious. She expected me to buy a second house for the kids to stay in when they're with her, so she could live in it too, all on my dime. I tried to keep calm, but had to ask, Toad, how does that make sense? You already have a home. She went off about how their house is too small for a family her size, and how it's affecting the kids' mental well-being. She talked about equal standards, like I'm supposed to make up for every choice she's made since we split. When I told her that's not going to happen, she pulled out every guilt trip in the book. She said, "Don't you want the kids to feel just as comfortable at my place as they do with you? And it's unfair that you're not willing to provide for their full living experience." She acted like I was a cold-hearted jerk because I didn't want to buy her family a new house. At this point, I was done. I told her, Toad, look, the twins have everything they need at your place. If you think they need a bigger house, that's something you and your husband can handle. I'm not responsible for upgrading your home. She was quiet for a second, then snapped back. Well, if the kids end up feeling like they have a real home only with you, that'll be on you. I shook my head, and that was the end of the conversation. I'm not sure how she thought this was a reasonable request. I want the best for my kids, but that doesn't mean I'm buying her a whole new lifestyle. I guess there's no limit to what she'll ask for, but I'm clear now. I'm drawing the line, and I'm not budging. And that's the end of this story. But tell me, what would you do if your ex tried to come back after realizing she made a mistake? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more.